Hi everyone, good afternoon and happy Hanukkah. Given what happened last night in Monsey, I felt that I have to share something, try and push back the darkness and share some light. I saw a quotation by a journalist, I think she works for The Forward, her name is Abital Goldschmidt. And she wrote, "Jewish blood is cheap, Hasidic blood's on clearance." I couldn't agree more. The way the media covers what's happening with my people wrenches my heart, and it should of every person, Jewish or not. Certainly, if Jewish blood is cheap, Hasidic blood is on clearance. And I wanted to share two accounts of my experience in Crown Heights in line with these events, the eruption of anti-Semitism that has happened in New York and around the world. The one has to do with the Crown Heights riots, and the other one has to do with an incident that happened at my home just last week. So I came here from South Africa. I was overjoyed to be leaving behind the racism of apartheid that I had grown up with. I had rallied against it. And my experiences and those of my friends are for another time. I thought when I was coming here to America that this was just going to be a panacea where race relations were wonderful. I was shocked when they weren't. I was shocked at how fragile and tense interpersonal relationships were. But then I experienced the Crown Heights riots, which was, I believe, the most serious attack on Jews in this country, possibly in the Western world, all sanctioned by David Dinkins. So the background for that, for those of you who maybe weren't around at that time or had forgotten, is that there was a car driven by a Jewish man. He was following the Lubavitcher Rebbe's car to the Ohel, and he got into an accident with a car that pushed him towards the sidewalk. He saw that there were adults there, says that he tried to swerve, and in doing so hit concrete, something on the road, and pinned two children, Gavin Cato and I think his sister, and Gavin was killed, tragically died in that accident. In response to this accident, which is exactly what it was, the Crown Heights riots erupted, very much fueled by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who spoke about, the diamond dealers. And I think that in his marches around Crown Heights, if I remember from that time, there was an Israeli flag that was burned. I, at the time, lived, my husband and I, with our two older children in an apartment on Brooklyn Avenue. And from our back window, we heard a raucous. I just could hear from that sound that this wasn't just kids or teens making a noise. They were actually the attackers of Yankel Rosenbaum, a student who was here from Australia, was murdered by the rioters by a man named Lemrick Nelson, who, although he was acquitted, later admitted to the crime. And we saw them running away. I knew something terrible had happened. That was the first. There were no cell phones in those days. Social media wasn't happening. And I just knew there was like this chill that went through my body. Something is going on. And for the next 3 days, the community that I lived in was shut down in fear. I had an infant. Oh yeah, so it was only my son was born at the time. My oldest, I had this little boy, and couldn't go out to buy diapers, just didn't feel safe to be able to leave the apartment building. I had friends whose homes were damaged, stores were ransacked, Molotov cocktails thrown through the window. And David Dinkins did nothing. In fact, he said, let the rioters vent their rage. And that, folks, that was a choice. If you're sitting at the dining room table and you choose not to participate and clear the dishes from the table, you haven't not made a choice. You've chosen not to participate. And if you say, I'm stuck in a job and there's nothing I can do, well, you've chosen to stay in that job. We are making choices all the time, and doing something is not, an act of doing is not the only choice. Not doing abstention is also a choice. David Dinkins chose to do nothing. And I don't remember who was the senator at the time, maybe it was Moynihan, who said, if you don't get into action with what's happening in Crown Heights, I'm going to bring the feds in. So finally, after standing on the sidelines, police were able to take action in terms of these riots. So I wouldn't say it was a pogrom in the sense that it was organized and funded by his admin, but it was only a city-sanctioned pogrom, and it did cost him, thank God, his next election. Now, about a year later, and this is all, I'm arrived in Crown Heights shocked that that could happen over here. I arrive in Crown Heights thinking that there's going to be just this, I'm running away from apartheid and the injustices of discrimination, and then experience this, receiving that. Wow. 1 year, I don't remember if it was a full year, but about the next year, riots erupted in LA. And that was when 4 police officers who had beaten Rodney King after he tried to flee. He tried to evade arrest, and they brutally beat him. It was reported by someone, posted online, and LA erupted in riots. Now, at the time, of course, I'm watching it, as the observant Jew, meaning the observer in me. And what did David Lincoln say? He says, there is a system of justice in this country, and we demand a retrial. Us flawed. Oh, so you do have a voice? But when it comes to the Jews, you don't have a voice. Or maybe he did. He had a message that he said silently, which was, go get the Benjamins, to paraphrase a recent line from politicians. Now, I believed then, and I do now, that the LA riots would not have happened if the Crown Heights riots had been handled differently. Discrimination might begin with the Jews, but it doesn't end there. And if there is no freedom, if people around the world can't stand up for the freedom, for the dignity of Jews, then their own dignity is at stake. So that's kind of the broad view looking back a number of years. But I wanted to share something else, because anti-Semitism is often so subtle that one can't really point a finger. And I say this with a precautionary note that I can't say certainly what happened last week. But here's the story. I have a sign that says do not disturb, or the other sign is please knock. Sometimes if I'm babysitting my grandson, I don't want the bell to ring. Twice a week, I offer a free Tanya class and a free Parsha class, Tuesday and Wednesday at noon. And because I'm recording and I don't want to have to go back and re-edit that, I put the sign outside and it says do not disturb. Well, there is a UPS man. I have been in touch with UPS, and I did call the police. A UPS driver who refuses to have a conversation with me about what alternatives there are. There's a gate downstairs. Please put the package through the gate. If it's small enough, it's locked and closed, won't be a problem. Nothing doing. So when he rang the other day, I happened to be recording something I wanted to upload online. I went outside and I saw him there. I said, excuse me, sir, I've asked you before not to ring this bell. And he says to me, honey, don't you give me, I can't remember what the expression is, like, don't tell me what to do. I was just shocked, tried to speak to him, calls me lovey, honey, and I said to him, I prefer it if you'll call me Mrs. Zukernik. And he started to swear and scream at me. I couldn't even explain how I thought we might have a solution. And he says, that's it, I am never dropping a package here. And he picks up this big thing that had been delivered to take it away. I said, excuse me, I want my package. And all I'm asking is that if that sign is up, it's maybe 2 hours out of the week, that you either come back or take it somewhere where I can pick it up. I don't mind to pick it up. It's preferable to me than that. Anyway, he wouldn't. He took it back, and there were a bunch of people at the bus stop across the street. And when he saw that they were there and I was walking after them, he, dropped that package. I picked it up and came inside. So I was a little shaken by it. But what really bothered me is that later in the day, I go out, I come back. On the front steps, a bloodied tampon. I'm sorry to speak about that online. Gross, absolutely gross. with a tissue on top of it on our front steps. Not comfortable. Later that night, my son came over to visit, and he left out the back gate. Comes back inside. I had said goodbye to him. He says, "Ma, there's someone defecated outside the gate." Now, it's possible, and also, tissue neatly plopped on top. I was just floored. I don't know that it was that person, but it's highly possible that they're connected. And either way, that happened outside the gate. And actually, I had been raking leaves earlier in the day. It was towards evening, and I heard someone say, "That's the gate, I'll wait here." And there's been a lot of construction going on, so I thought, maybe someone's dropping something. I didn't realize exactly what they were going to drop, as a friend of mine says. Anyway, I won't even go into that. But just that discomfort of feeling that one is being targeted. It could be really overt and it can be very subtle. And in the last week, I heard my friend Dahlia spoke about it on Facebook. 3 women were attacked on one day by someone screaming about Jews. And apparently before Shabbat in 770, the Lubavitch World Headquarters Central Synagogue, a man came in threatening to shoot them up. He left, and I think the situation is being investigated. So just this sense, it's like a facade, that things are okay. And underneath, my daughter says to me, "Ma, I think you should buy pepper spray. We're thinking of that." And then, 2 other people said to me, "We're going to buy pepper spray." Crazy. What can we do about it? I saw an article on CNN. What are we going to do to curb anti-Semitism? Now, that article was written, I think, by someone who, I don't know what his position is in the World Jewish Congress. I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but I want to say something else to CNN. You really want to know what you can do to stop the anti-Semitism? Stop with your elite brand of anti-Semitism. During the Holocaust, the New York Times and other outlets buried the news in the newspapers' inner pages. And now they put Israel front and center, but what? With their elite version of anti-Semitism. They're not going into a kosher mart in New Jersey and shooting at them, God forbid, too sophisticated. They're not going into Monsey and stabbing people with a machete. No, they're too sophisticated. But what will they do? Their anti-Semitism, their particular brand. I was so resistant to the article. What can we do about anti-Semitism? Stop your elitist version of anti-Semitism, which is anti-Israel sentiment and pro-BDS ideology, and a whole lot more. I think it was in the 80s that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said the war for Israel is being fought in the media rooms around the country. Remarkable. Even then, he knew what was going on. And I say to CNN and journalists of their ilk, you're doing exactly the same. You may not attack us physically, but you are attacking Jews with your slick formulations that Jewish blood and my Hasidic blood isn't as red as yours. We are not fooled. I want to read something that I have written to those journalists. Get off your wobbly purchases. Examine your bias and confirmation bias. Look inside your hearts. When Rashida Tlaib posts about the horrors of white supremacy after the Kosher Mart massacre and then deletes it with her tail between her legs when she found out that the perpetrators were black, because black on Jewish crime doesn't meet her standards, and besides, who cares about the Jews if the story can't be milked to promote her agenda? Call her out. Find out whether you're doing the same thing as a journalist. Read the history, and by that I mean the full history. Yes, from the time of Joshua until today, including the rewriting of events that has gone on for the past 70 years. There is no history of the Palestinian people. Are journalists here aware of the fact that the Arab tribe in Hebron is different from the tribe of Arabs in Shechem? Are they? That the two are not going to meet because they're warring tribes, but just as the Bible relates, haters of Israel unite when it comes to destroying Jews. Have you been to the land? Do you know what Section C is? Areas where Jews cannot go. Judenrein, verboten. That has to be a separate post where I share pictures with you that in Shem, if you look, and it's called by the Arabs Nablus, there's an area where the houses are so tiny, they're matchbox houses where people, their slaves and lesser thans are forced to live there. I have stood on those mountains. Har Gerizim and Har Evel are the two mountains where the Jewish people received their curses, the curses and the blessings, and Shem is right in between. Where someone pointed out to me that on the mountain of the curses, the houses of the Arabs don't go higher than 1/3 up because they don't want to be recipients, they don't want to receive the curse that was inflicted on the Jewish people. They understand the history. If you're a real journalist, get out there and learn that history, including the rewriting for the past 70 years. Go visit the land. I know it well, and we'll share some thoughts in another video. Do it. If you stand for truth, challenge your beliefs, and if you don't, please stop pretending you actually care. Now I want to end with one last thought. The Zohar tells us that there is a decree that Esav hates Yaakov. There's something built into the nature of reality. It's like this illness of anti-Semitism is something that is placed upon us, upon the people of the world and upon the people of Israel. But I do believe, what I understand from studying Hasidut and Torah, is that the only thing that can save people from acting in the most terrible ways is a sense of purpose, being beholden to something that is way higher than they are. And it is only when every person in this world realizes, A, that they are created in the divine image, and B, that they have their own unique mission, that violence will stop. It's not unworthy of mentioning that these attacks have been ramped up so much during the holiday of Hanukkah. That holiday where the Greeks tried to wipe us out in a tiny vial, that bitter olive crushed gives forth oil, which gives forth light. The suffering we experience brings light. As the Talmud says, Min hashachor sheba'ayin adam ro'eh, a person sees from the black of the light. And the attack on light happens during Hanukkah. It is our obligation to try and stop those attacks, to shine back. As the Rebbe says, a little light dispels much darkness. I encourage everyone who's watching and who will watch this to touch a point of light in yourself and to shine that light. We have to reflect it back at others. You are created in God's image, and may love trump hatred. God bless everyone. Have a happy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.